Um, Namaste everyone. I'm Ashay Naik, and thanks for joining me on this IndicChat. Today's session will be on ancient Indian political thought as contained in the Pancatantra and how the text explains political thought through the medium of stories. I am thankful to Indic Book Club for giving me this opportunity to speak on this topic, as well as the sponsors, the media partners, Creative India Magazine and Swarajya Magazine for promoting this event. So the plan for this session is as follows. Firstly, I will do an invocation to the deities and the teachers and to Vishnu Sharma and the Pancatantra, on which I have written my commentary called the Natural Enmity. Secondly, I will discuss some of the general themes relating to political thought which occur in the Pancatantra. After that, we will delve into some of the stories. I have about 4 stories planned, but we will see how we go with time, and we will have a closer look as to what kind of Niti is taught in these stories, and how by facilitating the development of an empathy with its characters and the production of Rasa, the Pancatantra communicates its message. After that, I can take on some of the questions, and then we can wind up. The main takeaway that I would like you to have from this particular session is that firstly, I would like to improve the appreciation of Pancatantra in the Indian community in particular and the world at large, which is that unfortunately the Pancatantra has come to be regarded as a collection of children's fables, but it is far from that. It's a serious text. It discusses very serious political thought in the form of stories, and the stories are not just something interesting that is given to you because political thought is a very dry subject and so on. No, the stories are actually case studies, and they model the kind of political challenges the readers, at least the readers in the time of the Pancatantra, were likely to confront in their world, and much of that is still relevant even today, as the stories will show. So, a better appreciation of the Pancatantra is one thing that I would like all of you to take away from this session. And the other thing is, Independence Day was just around the corner, and it's a celebration of all things Indian, at least in this week. And so, one of the things that makes me feel very proud as an Indian is a book like the Pancatantra, and it's really a privilege to be born in a culture that has produced a text like this, and to go to the world and say that I come from a land that can create that has produced texts of such great literary value. And I hope that at the end of the session that you would be feeling the same as well with regards to the Pancatantra. So that's really my objective in holding this, in joining this session. And as I said, I'm really grateful to IndicChat for having given me this opportunity. So without much ado, let's get started. And I will, as I said, I will start with an invocation to the deities and the gurus. Okay, so Om Namah Shri Sharada Ganapati Gurubhyah Mahakavibhyo Namah. Brahma Rudra Kumaro Hari Varuna Yama Vannirindra Kuberash Chandradityau Saraswati Udadhiyuga Naga Vayururvi Bhujangaha Siddha Nadyoshvinau Shrir Ditiraditi Sutta मातरश्चण्डिकाद्या वेदास्तीर्थानि यज्ञा गणवसुमुनयः पान्तु नित्यं ग्रहाश्च मन्वे वाचस्पतये शुक्राय पराशराय ससुताय चाणक्याय च विदुषे नमोऽस्तु नयशास्त्रकर्तृभ्यः सकलार्थशास्त्रसारं जगति समालोक्य विष्णुशर्मेदम् तन्त्रैपञ्चभिरेतत् चकार सुमनोहरं शास्त्रम्. Namo Namaha. So with that invocation of the deities and to the gurus, Manu and Vachaspati and so on, and to Vishnu Sharma and the book Pancatantra which he has written, which, I mean, this invocation is at the start of his book, so I thought I'd recite it at the beginning of this session. With that, I'll just give a brief introduction of myself and the book Natural Enmity, which I have written as a commentary on the first Tantra of the Panchatantra. I mean, as I said, my name is Ashay Naik. I work as a software engineer in Sydney, Australia. But I have always been very deeply interested in Sanskrit and Indic thought. So a few years back, I completed my honors in Sanskrit from the University of Sydney. And in the course of that study, I came across the Panchatantra as well. I mean, the Sanskrit text of the Panchatantra, as well as the Western interpretations by some scholars who sort of interpreted it as saying that the stories are about social oppression and or about political immorality. So I wrote my honors thesis in trying to rebut these misrepresentations of the Panchatantra. But in the course of it, I also realized that the Panchatantra deserves a full-fledged commentary of its own, which can really do justice to the kind of thought that is contained in it. And I was inspired in writing this commentary by works, like Adi Shankaracharya's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, or Medhatiti's commentary on the Manusmriti. I mean, in these commentaries, these ancient commentators, they take us through the text step by step and allow you to sort of really immerse in the text. Instead of just writing analytical essays that tell you, oh, this is what the Gita teaches, or that is what Manusmriti teaches, a commentarial form really allows you to, engage very deeply with the text, and that's what I really wanted to do for the Panchatantra, and that's why I thought I should write a commentary. And so the first step of it was this book, Natural Enmity, which is a commentary on the first Tantra, that is the separation of friends, or Mitra Bheda. That's about 50% of the book, and the other Tantras are comparatively smaller. Now, the strategy that I employed in writing this commentary was what Gadamer has called closing the hermeneutic circle between the reader and the text. What that means is an interpretation should take the reader into the world of the text, explain the text from its own point of view, because I mean, the Panchatantra was written in a very different kind of world from our own. That world I see as characterized by social hierarchy, political despotism, kinship communities or jatis. That's how people were living. And I see the Panchatantra as sort of trying to understand the problems of that world and trying to solve those problems in its own way, whatever it thought would be good, in order that the system, whatever is there, is not oppressive to people. So that's what I mean by taking the reader into the text of the world. At the same time, we also need to bring the text into our world and see what the text can tell us about the problems that we face in our world. So our world I see as being characterized by goals like social equality, political liberty, universal brotherhood. I mean, this is radically different, I think, from anything that the Panchatantra would have known. But then if you have a text which is, really plumbs the depths of human nature and really tries to understand things in a very fundamental way, as the Pancatantra does, then it can give us insights even in our world. And I think you would be persuaded of this statement when I take you through some of the stories. Okay. So, but before I come to the stories, I just want to highlight certain important themes in the Pancatantra in general. Okay, what is the Pancatantra about? So, one of the first themes that to cover is the importance of wealth. So usually we think of Indian thought as, consisting mostly of Vedanta and Advaita and Parabrahma and all that sort of stuff. And I think we don't really pay a lot of attention to the Vyavaharik text, that is text that teaches how to actually work in Vyavahar and how to conduct Vyavahar, basically. And that's what, that's what the Arthashastra tradition is about, and the Pancatantra is basically located in that. So right at the beginning of the Pancatantra, you have the model, you have the model in the form of Vardhamana, who is the Artharthi, like he's a businessman, he's born rich, but he realizes the importance of wealth, and he tries to undertake a business to increase his wealth. So that is one of the points that the Pancatantra makes, and there's a very nice verse on that which I can share with you, which is Arthaihi artha nibadhyante gajaihi iva mahagajaha nahi anarthavata shakyam vanijyam kartum ihaya. Now, the reason I'm sharing with you is because there's this wonderful metaphor here that wealth begets wealth, that is, use wealth to earn wealth. And the example that is given here is that of elephants attracting elephants. So basically, if you want to, if you want to catch an elephant, then usually like a female elephant or someone is used, and then she attracts the male elephant, and then the other elephant is caught. I mean, one of my friends shared this wisdom with me, and so it starts off really like this, this one of these rich dad, poor dad kind of stories, or we want to be rich. There's these kind of books that are available now that sort of emphasize prosperity and ask you, encourage you to increase your wealth and so on, and everything else, and everything that is worth achieving, like even dharma and so on, happens through wealth. So there's a lot of emphasis on wealth in the Pancatantra. And at the same time, I mean, if you look at the story of Vardhamana, he's not only industrious, he's not only taking risks to increase his wealth by traveling abroad, like abroad in the sense from Kashmir to Mathura, but that would have been a perilous undertaking in its time, and he takes that risk so that to increase his wealth. And he makes his animals, the bulls and so on, he employs, work really hard. But at the same time, when the bull gets injured in the forest, he's very compassionate. He holds back the caravan, for a few days and so on. So it's not only industry, but even compassion. And then later on, when he's mistakenly told that the bull has died and so on, then he performs all the necessary rites for the posthumous welfare of the bull and so on. So basically, industry and compassion, together are presented to us in this model of Vardhamana. At the same time, generally sannyasis and monks, sannyasis and ascetics, monks and so on, are sort of depicted as frauds in this book. And I think that there is probably a clash here between the Grihastha and the Sannyas ashram. There has always been a case of, because the sannyasis usually think that, oh, we are, attaining moksha and all that, and that's the important stage, and that's what's worth achieving. But then it is the Grihasthas who uphold society, who uphold order in society, and makes society possible, and even sannyas ashram possible, because they are dependent on begging and alms, which the householder provides. And therefore, I mean, sometimes these kind of stuff which usually you would hear from an Advaitin or a sannyasi or so on, are kind of used in a very negative way in the Pancatantra. So if I can just read you a small passage, you have a very beautiful passage which you would think is very spiritual, like asaro yam samsaraha, this samsar is asar, Giri Nadi Vegopamam Yauvanam, youth is fleeting, Trunagni Samam Jivitavyam, life is fragile, Abrachaya Sadrusha Bhogaha, or Swapna Sadrusha Putra Mitra Bhrutya Kalatra Varga Sambandha. So all these sambandhas we have and relations and all that, it's all just Swapna Sadrusha. But who's saying these things? If you see the person who's saying this, is actually a person who's trying to, he wants to become a disciple of a guru so that he can rob his monastery. And he wants to get into the monastery, but he's not able to he can't find any other way. So he thinks, okay, I'll be a disciple of that. And he says all these things. And a lot of times you find these sort of platitude being said. And what the Pancatantra is saying is that just because you hear a person saying all these things, do not trust that he really means any of this. These things are often said by people to try and swindle their victims. So the Pancatantra is very, it's very suspicious, you might say, of all these, of all those who take the monastic path and so on. Are these? I mean, is it really possible for human beings to be that, to have that sort of vairagya bhava and so on? So I mean, it's not like it's impossible, but you should be careful that nobody is deceiving you by taking on a vairagya bhava. And then there's a very nice line in the first tantra itself, which says, Kaha kala kani mitrani ko desha ko vyayagamo kaschaham kachame shaktir iti chintya muhurmuhu. The reason why I bring this up is because it reminded me very much of the Bhaja Govindam, which goes like Kastvam Koham Kuta Ayata and so on. So a monastic text like the Bhaja Govindam, it keeps kind of saying that realize the illusoriness of the world, ask yourself who are you really, and so on. That's the sort of thing you will get in all the Nivrutti texts or the Moksha texts or Vairagya texts and so on. But in a Vyavaharik text like the Pancatantra, that actually asks us to think on political lines like, Kaha Kalaha, what is the time? Kani Mitrani, who are your friends? Who are your allies? Who are your enemies? Ko Deshaha, what is the place? What are the customs where you are living? Kaschaham Kachame Shaktihi, what is your power? What can you achieve in this world? Iti Chintya Muhurmuhu. These are the kind of things that you should think of. So basically the Pancatantra is a very worldly text. It encourages worldliness, and so that's one of the major themes that we see throughout this book. And it encourages travel, risk taking, whatever is needed. And just because you have a lot of wealth does not mean you should just sit quietly on it, but use it for investment and that includes, charity and building public amenities and all that. Expend it on worthy causes. Don't just hoard it and so on. The other important principle that we see here is that of natural enmity and incidental enmity. Natural enmity, as I said, is the title I have taken for my book. So which in Sanskrit is Swabhava Vair or Sahaja Vaira. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to say that we are Swabhava Vairis? Now there's actually a dialogue in the second tantra where you have a mouse and a crow, and the crow wants to become friends with the mouse. Now the crow is the predator and the mouse is the prey, and so the mouse tells the crow that you and I are Swabhava Vairis, we are natural enemies of each other. So how can friendship ever be possible between us? Now, what it means is that there are certain fundamental differences between human groups, and they can never be overcome. And it is very important to understand that the rivalry that we have, is it natural or is it incidental? If it is incidental rivalry, then that can be solved by remedying whatever is the cause of it. But natural enmity means that there are differences between human groups that are so fundamental that they can never be resolved. And therefore, natural enmity will only end when one or the other side is destroyed. So, for example, if you take, let's say, the enmity or the rivalry between India and Pakistan, I mean, is it a natural enmity or is it an incidental enmity? So if you say, for example, that our rivalry exists because of the Kashmir problem or because of the water sharing problem, then that's like saying it's an incidental enmity. If we solve these problems, our enmity will go away. But on the other hand, if we say that the enmity between Pakistan and India exists at a very fundamental level because Pakistan was born of the idea of a two-nation theory and we reject it, then that is an example of natural enmity. I mean, then there is no way in which this enmity can be resolved. If the very foundation principle of, say, Pakistan is not acceptable to us, then there is nothing that can be done about it. Now, or another quick example I can give you is that of, say, the Hindu-Christian issue of, proselytization. Now, Christians, for example, believe that, Jesus, by his sacrifice, by his crucifixion, paid for the sins of all human beings. Now, Hindus, on the other hand, perform dharma to remove papa. Now, if you're saying on the one hand that that Jesus paid for the sins of all, then that means no other culture should be performing any dharma because he has paid for all the papa. Which means that every time you perform a dharma, you are basically saying that you're basically questioning the efficacy of Jesus' sacrifice. Which is why then the Christians have to go around proselytizing everyone, because everyone has to stop their dharmas, right? And accept Jesus as their savior. Otherwise, the Christian doctrine is falsified. So see, these are the kind of problems that there is no solution for them. It's a fundamental contradiction, and we just have to learn to live with it. Okay. So, however, I think some people somehow think that, okay, because of this idea of natural enmity, what the Pancatantra is saying is that, those who are natural enemies will perpetually be at war with each other. But that's not what the Pancatantra is saying. In fact, it is often missed that ironically, this very passage that deals with natural enmity, that explains natural enmity, occurs in the second tantra, where actually the predator and the prey become the best of friends. So Pancatantra is not saying that because there is natural enmity, so friendship between these parties is impossible. Rather, instead, what it is saying is that look how this friendship has, however, developed. The friendship between the crow and the mouse develops over a very long time. Initially there is no trust between them. Both are aware of the contradictions of each other's, the fears of each other, and so on. The crow promises that he will not step into the mouse's fort. The mouse does not want to come out and meet the crow. And then there is a lot of talking and gift giving, and slowly that friendship really matures. And both are conscious of the contradictions between them. They don't kind of get, oh, we are friends now, so we don't have to worry about the predator-prey problem. No, those contradictions, both of them are aware, but they are both committed, however, to work around it and nonetheless make that friendship work, which is why it works. Okay. On the other hand, if you take the first stories, okay, the first story also has a lot of these predator-prey issues and natural enmity issues, where you have many stories with the lion and the bull, or the lion and the camel. They become friends, or the lion gives refuge to these animals, and but later on it breaks down. And the reason why it breaks down is often because that alliance is formed emotionally. They don't really think over what they are doing. They don't, and which is why then it becomes very easy for someone to cause divisions and cause a clash between them. So the Pancatantra is not saying that that natural enmity is impossible. It's just saying that, that friendship between natural enemies is impossible. It's just saying that you really need to work for it, and you will never be able to solve the internal contradictions. So the potential for conflict will always remain, and you better be aware of these things. Otherwise, it will break down. And because many of the cases in the Panchatantra, in the first tantra, actually show how a friendship across or friendship between natural enemies ultimately breaks down, I thought that the first tantra is actually dealing with the natural enmity problem, and that's why I have titled the book as Natural Enmity. There are many more things to go. I'll probably just take one more one more important point, which is two kind of political systems are shown in this book. One is the Samrajya, and that is usually modeled with the lion and the jackal and the leopard and or what is called as what are known as the meat eaters are often shown. That kind of a government where the lion is the king and the ministers are of a different jati, that is, say, the jackal or the leopard, the crow, and so on. that is basically modeled as the Samrajya. And on the other hand, you also have the Sangharajya, where the king is actually the first among equals, and the king and his ministers always belong to the same jati. So you could have a monojati herd, and it can be a herd of elephants, a group of frogs, a troop of monkeys, a troop of mice, or whatever. I mean, wherever you see stories in which you generally have a chieftain and his followers are of the same jati, then that is usually a model of a metaphor for the Sangharajya. And I think although most of the stories in the first Tantra deal with Samrajya issues, like, the government is of the king and the ministers, who is usually the Jackal and so on. And then an outsider usually comes into this circle who has a different point of view, who is almost like a personage or a civilian. Sometimes it's the bull, sometimes it's a camel. And then once he gets into the government, and all sorts of problems occur, and how the king has to balance between these two personalities. So I think that would have been quite a problem in ancient India, and the Samrajya stories actually deal with that kind of problem. That is, how can the king balance between the government, whose task is danda and so on, and or sometimes war and aggression and military pursuits in general, and then you have the outsider, who is the civilian, who is interested more in arts and altruism and those kind of pursuits. But I think, although like many of the stories in the first Tantra are about the Samrajya, I think the Pancatantra has a soft corner for the Sangharajya. I think the chief of the Sangharajya is always shown in a much better way than the Samrajya. And usually you see the Sangharajya, the chief of the Samrajya is usually the lion. The lion is usually a metaphor for the king of the Samrajya or the Samrat, and the elephant is the general metaphor for the chief of the Sangharajya, because he's the Yuthapati, he's the model Yuthapati. So the elephant is usually used for that. And I think one of the reasons why perhaps Ganesh or Ganpati has an elephant head is I think because the elephant is usually seen as the model for this chief of the Sangha political establishment. And again, you see that the elephant and the lion are often seen as natural enemies. So in all these stories, the lion is always fighting with the elephant, and he gets crippled. So I think in sort of trying to say that these are natural enemies, and so the monarchy always wants to obliterate the Sangharajya, and but it gets it is hard, and often the lion gets crippled in all his wars with the elephant. I mean, that's a very common motif across these stories. But if you see the reality, then we know that it is the Samrajyas which ultimately destroyed the Sangharajyas. With Magadha finally emerging as the supreme Samrajya. So I think that much of the Sangharajya ideas can be seen through these stories. I think we were almost half time. I had couple of other things to say, but I think I'll get into a couple of stories, as I said, because I think that's more important. So one of the stories that I want to start off with is that will show you the Samrajya politics. Is the camel and the lion's retainers. So I won't go into so the first Tantra basically consists of a main story, which is the separation of friends, and there are about 30 sub-narratives in that. So I will one of those sub-narratives is this camel and the lion's retainers, and I will just explain how that story works. So those of you who may not be aware, I'll quickly summarize it. You have a camel who wanders into a forest. In that forest, there is a lion, and he has 3 retainers, 3 ministers, the jackal, a crow, and a leopard. And they come across this lion. They've never seen. So they came across this camel. They have never seen a camel before. But the lion is impressed with him in some way, and he gives him refuge. He offers him protection. He says you can wander in the forest freely without any fear. So the camel lives with them, and he's like the symbol of a. For me, I think he's more a symbol like a migrant community coming to a to a kingdom, and they are given refuge, and they said, okay, you can live here and you can follow your custom, whatever it is. So I think that's what that story sort of symbolizes. Now, as I said, well, the lion gets into a battle with an elephant, and he's crippled, and he can't hunt anymore. So starvation then hits the king, hits their government. There is no food, but these three retainers nonetheless are very loyal, and they stay with the king. And so the lion then says that, well, then go and look for some food, and so that we can continue. But and then they try to look for for food in the forest, but there is nothing. There's a famine at the same time, and so there is no food available either. And finally, the lion is about to die, and the jackal says that, look, I think things are now getting serious, and why are we, bothering about this food and things so much when we have the camel? I mean, the camel is our natural food. We should be killing the camel and eating him. And he says this. He tells this to the lion, and the lion is enraged. I mean, how can I do that? I mean, it's that would, I have given him my word of protection. I can't deceive him in this way. I mean, I cannot kill him like this, and it would be beneath me. It would be contemptible to commit such an act. So what the jackal does is he kind of gathers all the other retainers together along with the camel, and he says that, look, the lion is about to die. He's the master. He's our swami. We are his bhrutyas, we are his servants. He has protected us. He has nourished us for so long. We should be, we cannot let him die like this. We should sacrifice ourselves for him. We should offer ourselves as food to him. And they all agree that, yeah, we should do that. And so the crow comes first and volunteers that, look, kill me and eat me and save yourself. And of course, the lion rejects that sacrifice. And then the leopard also tries it, and the jackal tries and says, eat me, and so on. And then the camel is now sort of feeling that, oh, everyone is offering themselves as food and the lion is rejecting. So maybe I should be doing this as well. It would not be good if I just sort of not do this. And so he also offers himself and says, you can eat me and save yourself, assuming that the lion would reject him as well. But as it happens, the lion obviously says, he gives his assent, and then these other animals, they pounce upon him and kill him. So that's basically the story. But what is the story telling us? So on the face of it, it looks like, the camel was deceived by all these other animals. And if you look at the prefatory verse, like all these stories start off with a verse, even that says the same thing, that, like if you get into a group of mischievous people who are cheats and so on, that they will trick you into, incurring some loss yourself. Like they might not actually do anything to you directly, but they will sort of shape your thinking in such a way that you will voluntarily commit, do some damage to yourself. And so you have to be very careful in the company of these people. That is the overt moral of the story. That's the superficial view. But if you look at it deeper, then what you realize is that is the camel really the tragic hero, and the jackal, is he really the villain? Because what you see is when the lion gets crippled and is not able to hunt and so on, and is suffering from starvation, these are the three meat eaters are the ones who are really affected by that. And they remain loyal to him through all these problems. So, they have kind of proved their loyalty. And in fact, the jackal tells the lion that, look, if you die, then, we have no choice but to follow you in the fire. Like, we will burn ourselves with you on the fire. I mean, because we are your loyal servants. So, these three animals, they have truly, I think, proved their loyalty to the king. But look at the camel. I mean, he is not affected by the problem. He is merely eating, because he's a grass eater, so he doesn't really have a problem with what has happened to the lion. And in fact, when these animals are all offering themselves as sacrifices, I mean, he is the one who is really deceiving, because he doesn't intend to offer himself as a sacrifice. I mean, sure, even the other animals are not intending it. And I mean, they know that the lion cannot eat them, like they're not the natural food of the lion. But the thing is, what becomes evident, what is clear from the story is that if there was any way in which they could kill, if they would have to kill themselves to save the lion, they would do it. We see this loyalty in them. On the other hand, the camel does not want to sacrifice himself. He is only saying that with the view that his sacrifice will be rejected. And so, I mean, this is how these Pancatantra stories work. They're very deceptive. So on the one hand, the Pancatantra is saying that, oh, there is all this deception going on in the world, and it shows these stories and explains how the deception works in this world. But at the same time, I think the author is also trying to deceive the readers in some way by saying one thing, but actually when you read through the story, something else becomes apparent through deeper reflection. And if you have to understand this story in the context of the real world, for example, then as I said, I mean, the camel is like the symbol or the metaphor for the migrant community, right? Like, let's say a migrant community comes and settles in the kingdom. Now, what if so the kingdom has protected them. The king has looked after their security. Maybe he's given some concessions to them, and so on. Now, if a calamity strikes the kingdom, what is the role of this migrant community? Should they not be parting with some of their wealth and so on to save the kingdom? Now, what becomes apparent in this story is that here you have a migrant community who is not willing to help out. And then the question is, should we deceive? Is it then proper for the government to deceive them in some way, or to extract the wealth from them? Because that is something that they should have done. As I said, I mean, the camel was deceived, but what was he deceived into doing? He was deceived into doing his own duty. I mean, this is what he should have done anyway. He did not have to be deceived into doing this. So, so these are the kind of issues that come to the fore. And what we see is that, you see, the jackal, he's a very ordinary kind of a person. Like he doesn't have a problem with the camel. It's not like, once the camel joins the circle, he says, oh yeah, okay, our food has come, now let's eat him. That's not what he says. I mean, he's happy to have the camel. He does nothing to disturb the camel and so on. Because as long as the kingdom is fine, he has no problem, or like the minister has no problem with the migrant community. But it is only when the kingdom is on the verge of bankruptcy, or when the king is about to, or in this case the lion is about to die, that's when he says, well, look, there are these rich people, this rich group who we have allowed to flourish in our land. Should we not now get them to sort of contribute to this problem? Now, that's how the jackal is thinking, whereas the lion is his situation is a bit different. Like, he's a very honorable person, and he is in fact ready to die. Okay, he's not saying that. I mean, even when the jackal comes to him and says that, oh, we can kill the lion, kill the camel, he's not happy with that solution. So he's a man of honor. He's willing to say that he's ready to die rather than kill the camel and save himself. But what the thing is, the jackal, because of his deception, it makes it very difficult for him to keep his honor. I mean, as long as if he had to kill the camel, he stopped himself from doing that. But when the camel was deceived into offering himself before the lion, then it became a temptation too difficult for him to resist. And so even though he agreed that, okay, let the camel be killed, we see that he does not kill the camel himself. Now, this is something very different, because usually the lion, the paradigm is that the lion will kill the animal and take the first share, and then the other retainers will join. That is how it works. But in this case, I think he was too ashamed to kill. I mean, though he agreed that, okay, fine, if this camel is so foolish as to voluntarily offer, and so technically, I am not, technically I'm free. It's okay to kill him. It's not a technical problem anymore. But he knows that spiritually what he's doing is the wrong thing, and so he does not in the end kill the camel. But he kind of agrees with okay, and the other animals are the ones who kill it. So the thing is, I mean, through these stories, I mean, what is going on here is this is an example of how, the kind of challenges that a king is likely to face, a minister is likely to face, and these are like case studies which, say Vishnu Sharma is putting before the princess. What would you do in this case? What would you do if you were a camel? What would you do if you were the jackal? What would you do if you were the lion? Whose behavior you think is right, wrong, and how is this? And the thing is, it allows you to step into every character, because the story is being told from all angles. There is no good or evil out here. Everyone's difficulties, everyone's suffering is brought before you. And I think that is what is so powerful about these stories. And that is why I think that, when I say the Pancatantra communicates its moral through Rasa, that is what I mean. That, it allows you to empathize with these characters, to feel their problems, and through that, now you have to think whether what is the right thing to do here if you were to faced with such a challenge in a real circumstance. I had 2-3 more stories to go, but I can see that only about 15 minutes are left. So maybe we can have another chat session in the future for that. I'll just add another quick story, since we are talking about migrants here. Another good story about the problem between hosts and migrants is the bug and the louse story. So very quickly, that bug and the louse story is where there is a louse and her family. I mean, it's an entire jati, so it's something like a Sangharajya, you might say. But that's not important here. So you have a louse and a family living in the king's bedchamber. They are, drinking the delicious blood of and nutritious blood of the king. And then suddenly this buck comes there, and he wants to sort of enjoy that delicious food as well. So initially the louse tells him to get lost, but then he comes up with Atiti Devo Bhava and all that. Is this how you treat a guest, and so on. And this is another example of how things like Atiti Devo Bhava, or as I initially pointed out, talks about Vairagya and all that. Everything can be used to fool people. Okay, so you have to be very careful about how these platitudes are practiced in the world. So he comes up with all these ideas saying that, your behavior is not proper towards a guest and so on. And then she also feels a bit guilty that, yeah, it's not right. I mean, I'm enjoying all this bounty for myself, and I should be more sharing and all that. And so she allows him to stay. But she says that, look, there are some desha kala niyama. Okay, so there are some rules of the land. And the rules are that you can only bite the king after he's fast asleep, and you should only bite him in the foot, okay? And bite him very gently, okay? He shouldn't feel any pain. And he says, yeah, of course, I'll do that. No, not a problem. I will follow whatever other traditions of this land, and I have no problems with that. So but then what happens is that evening the king comes and lies on bed. And as soon as he has laid down, the buck cannot control himself, and he bites him very severely on the backside. And the lion and the king, of course, gets up, wakes up in pain, and he calls his guards, and there is a inspection of the bed. What are these insects doing here? And the bug at that time hides in one of the hollows in the bed, while the louse is very slow moving, and she and her family get caught, and all of them are exterminated. So that's the bug and the louse story. Now in the first story, we saw that the migrant faced a danger from the host and was killed by the host in the end. This is a reverse principle. It is showing how on account of the migrant, the host was wiped out. Now, the reason why I think this story is very interesting is, and the moral that the story starts off with is Adnyata Kula Shilasya na Pradatavyo Ashraya. So you should not give ashray to someone whose Kula and Shila is not known to you, right? One good example we can think of immediately are, say, the Rohingyas. I mean, have we done a proper study of their Kula and Shila? Do we know how these kind of people behave before refuge was given to them, and so on? So, I mean, that is what the Pancatantra would ask. In developing your refugee policy, a country, a nation should think of these things. What However, I mean, what this story really reminded me of when I first read it was the Muslim refugee crisis in Europe. I mean, now, Europe is, that King's Bed chamber, I felt was like, it's like Europe, right? It's got all these welfare economies, everybody's having a good time, everybody's enjoying themselves. And then you have these refugees saying, oh, you're enjoying all this by yourself, you should share it with other people, and there would be Europeans as well who would be thinking, oh yeah, we should be sharing the goods that we have with other people. And you might, I mean, if I would say that if the Pancatantra was written in our time, perhaps you might even expect, say, some of the family members of the Laos telling her that how we should be kind to this stranger who has come to us, and give him ashraya and so on. But then, of course, like the next thing. Sorry. Sorry about that. But what happens next is that the Laos tells the bug about the Desha Kala Niyama. So that is like these countries saying that, okay, fine, these refugees can settle in, but then they must learn our language, they must follow our customs, they must understand our law, and they must be, because any country, any land, I mean, even if it is flourishing and prosperous, it happens because there are certain traditions that are flourishing there, and whoever comes there must adapt themselves to those traditions and learn to live that way, because only then can everybody continue to be prosperous. But and initially, as I said, I mean, the bug obviously says, yeah, I mean, of course I will follow everything. I think the bug was being really sincere. I think he was not saying just to sort of cheat that Laos, and that's what really makes this also pathetic, that people do intend to be good and want to follow all these things. But then what happens is, like when the king actually comes to sleep there, the swabhava of the or the Sheila of that bug, it manifests itself, and then he can't control. So it's not like see, that's the thing. He didn't want to kill the Laos. The Laos was not his enemy. But the thing is, when you have these kind of contradictions in society, in the end, these kind of problems happen. And that's what the Pancatantra is saying. So similarly, say Muslim refugees in Europe, I'm sure they would initially say, I think Tariq Ramadan, for example, I remember has been saying that, oh, we must follow the law, we must follow the language, we must follow whatever are the customs out there. But then in the end, what happens is, just as in case of this bug that his nature ultimately asserted itself. So in case of in the human context, it's like the ideology ultimately asserts itself. So in case of the Muslim, for example, I think in the end, religion has asserted itself. I mean, it can't. I mean, they may say that, oh yeah, this is something separate, this is something private. It's not something we can have this and that and so on. But then gradually you see how difficult it is for even with the best intentions, if you're coming from a certain, say, I mean, if you have a certain religion, or it could be your culture, or it could be your personal behavior or whatever. I mean, there are things which we cannot control, things that drive us, and they will ultimately assert themselves. And these are the sort of issues that hosts must take into account when they give refuge to people in their community. So that's another story that I think is a very powerful migrant and host story as well. Okay, so I can see that I have about 9 more minutes. If there are any important questions that anyone has to ask, I could answer them, or I could go on with another story, which I think is which I like, which is the blue jackal story. I mean, I think that's a very famous story. Everyone knows that. I won't. Let's say, for saving time, I won't go into the details of the story itself. I just want to point out the various interpretations that can be made of this story as to why did the jackal ultimately fall. I mean, as you know, that he was painted blue. He fell into indigo vat and he became blue. Then he became the king, and he expelled all his own brethren and made. That is the other jackals, and he made the lion and the elephant and the tiger and all his ministers. He was embarrassed with his own clan, and he made these majestic animals his ministers. And but in the end, the jackals are howling and he cannot resist it. He howls in response, and everyone finds out he's a jackal, and then they kill him, right? So why does he get killed? What is the message here? Now, if you look at it from, I think someone just reading that story in itself might say, well, the message is probably that deceit does not really work for long. Ultimately your deceit is found out. But that is not really what the Pancatantra is saying, okay? Because there are other areas where deception is accepted. And I think deception is a very complicated topic, so I won't go into that in detail. I've written about that in the book. But deception is not the problem here, okay? If you look at the prefatory verse, the verse that opens up this story, it starts with the jackal telling the lion, that is in the first tantra. The jackal is really upset that the king has become friends with the bull, and he just keeps company with the bull. He has not expelled, but he has isolated himself from all the other animals, the jackal and so on, the other jackals and leopards. I mean, all the other meat eaters, so to speak. And he has sort of collaborated. He has kept exclusive company with this grass-eating bull, who he thinks is very enlightened, very knowledgeable. He's a spiritual thing, and the lion also feels like, yeah, I'm a noble person. I'm above this jackal and so on, and these other meat eaters. So and the bull is of course a very noble animal. He, I think, is a metaphor for a Brahminical ascetic. And this king, who is a Kshatriya, and I think it kind of the Kshatriya in the ancient India was considered as, I forget the exact word, but it was something like Rajas. He was predominantly Rajasic, but subordinately Sattvic. And the bull is a very sattvic animal. So because in the company of the bull, the lion's sattvic quality comes to the fore, and he wants to sort of develop that and stay with the bull. Whereas the jackal is a very rajasic animal. He all he's interested in is more meat and greedy and avaricious and calculating and all that stuff. So very worldly. So obviously the lion thinks he's a bit superior to all these animals and now wants to keep company with the bull. So what the jackal is and he makes the bull the prime minister and so on, and follows his advice in managing the kingdom, and the kingdom comes to it totters to its doom as a consequence, and so on. And so what the jackal is trying to says to the lion is that we are the Kramagata or the Anvayagata Bhrutyas. We have been with you through thick and thin. And instead of promoting one of us to the position of the prime minister, you have made this bull your prime minister, who's an outsider, okay? And you're trying to make this outsider into an insider. You're trying to make him feel as if, you're trying to sort of think that he can now be a part of, or you can be a part of him, or you too can be like a government or so on. And you made him your insider, you have made him part of your in-group, and you have made us part of the out-group, and this thing will not work. It will lead to your downfall. So the term Kramagata, Anvayagata is very important. I mean, and that just shows, there is just so much to learn from the Panchatantra. For example, if you look at dynastic politics in India today, I think one of the reasons why dynastic politics works, why is Rahul Gandhi still so important, I think is because people are likely to see him as Kramagata or Anvayagata, that is one who has come down in succession. Okay, this is an important concept in ancient India. So this is important. If you want, say, modern democracy to work, then you would have to change these terms, like reinterpret, say, Kramagata, Anvayagata as not just someone who is biologically next in line, but say in case of democracy, one who is elected into power is the Kramagata, like he has come next in succession. So how do you identify who is next in order? Because Kramagata or Anvayagata does not necessarily mean biological succession. It just means that whoever is properly next in line should succeed. And in every age we have to determine this. How do you decide who succeeds? Okay, so the other way of interpreting Kramagata, Anvayagata here is in terms of permanent employees and contractors and consultants. Like if you read this not in the political context but the economic context, then we know that every company has some permanent employees and it has some contractors. Now, permanent employees tend to show, they are kramagata bhuta. I mean, and that's what the Jackal is saying. Like, we are your permanent employees. This guy is a newcomer. How come he's come and you've put him over our head? This is not right. So it's like the permanent employee saying that, look, we have shown you our bhakti, and that's another debate there, because the permanent employees, they generally have bhakti in the sense that because they have stayed loyal to the company for long. But the newcomers, the contractors, they tend to have Shakti, like, they can hit the ground running, they have upskilled themselves, the company doesn't really have to invest in their education and so on. But the problem is that, they are likely to be disloyal to the company. Like if tomorrow something happens to the company, they're not going to stay for long, they're just going to move to greener pastures, whereas your permanent employees are likely to stick with you through thick and thin. But then the problem is that they may not, be upskilling themselves and so on and so forth. So this Shakti and Bhakti issue has also been discussed in the Pancatantra. Anyway, but it's not very relevant here, but I just thought I'd mention it. And so what he's saying is that, you should have given the Kramagata, Anvayagata, Bhuta the chance. So that is one interpretation of this story. Another interpretation that you can draw from it is that of the embarrassment that a person feels when he rises above his jati. So, for example, in Indian history, for example, we find many cases where, let's say, a person of a Shudra jati may become politically more powerful, may become the king and so on, and then he becomes embarrassed of other Shudra families. He starts considering himself a Kshatriya. He wants to be recognized as a Kshatriya. He wants to marry into Kshatriya families and so on. And I think that sort of thing has happened in Indian history. And the Panchatantra, this story in particular, is warning against that, saying that no, the community in which you are born, the community in which you have been raised, whose culture and tastes and so on you have acquired, those are your real brethren. I mean, those are your real people. And in the end, if you even try to move away from them, your affinity for them will ultimately assert itself. So that's another way of interpreting. We see that same kind of behavior, let's say, with Indians, in the diaspora as well. I mean, in the beginning, when Indians migrate to the West, they are likely to, stay with their Indian friends and Indian neighbors and try and help, get their help with them and so on. But then as they become, say, richer and more powerful and well off, then they would like to have white friends and stick with, get more with the white community and so on, and they become embarrassed with Indians or with India and so on. So these kind of behaviors also we see, and the Blue Jackal is sort of, I think it's a very important story because it is sort of getting into all these kind of behaviors. So that's I think. So I had another story, but I think we have run out of time here. So maybe if you are interested, we can have another session where I could discuss some more stories. My book is available for sale on Amazon.in as well as on the Crosswords portal. So if anyone is interested, you can buy that. So yeah, I mean, that's really what I think is there for me to cover for today. I'm really, as I said, express my gratitude again to Indic Book Club, and don't forget to tune into IndicChat next Sunday at 7 p.m. Because I was conducting this session from Australia, so it is at 11 a.m. Indian Standard Time, but next Sunday's session will be at 7 p.m. So yeah. I'll probably share my link on my Facebook page, my Twitter. Let me just perhaps I could just do it here in the comments for anyone. By the way, if anyone wants to stick around and have some questions or so on, I'm happy to take them. I can. That's not a problem. Okay, so I have so I've just put my link to the book to my book on Amazon.in. It looks like it's on a 20% discount at the moment, so that's good news, and I hope you'll enjoy this talk now. And if there are any questions, please put them in the comment section, and I'll wait for a few minutes to answer them. Otherwise, see you next time.